Hi, I am Miss Roz. Today's lecture is going to be about carbohydrates. This is the first lecture I like to talk about when we talk about nutrients. If you remember when we kind of introduced the My Plate and nutrition and the 6 essential nutrients, we talked about what those 6 essential nutrients are. So they were carbohydrates, water, vitamins, minerals, fats, and proteins. Right. So the next couple series of lectures are going to be about specific different nutrients. So this particular one is going to be about carbohydrates. Right. So carbohydrates is the largest part of a healthy diet. It should make up about 50% of the food that you eat in a day. And then it also is the main source of energy for you. Right, so you do need to have carbohydrates because they will be helping provide energy for you to breathe, run, walk, stand, cook, bake, for your brain to work. They say about 20% of the energy that you have is your brain uses about 20% of that energy alone. So carbohydrates are really important in your regular daily diet. And so just to keep in mind, typically our carbohydrates come from plant foods such as vegetables, fruits, grain products, beans, nuts, and seeds. Right? So we break down carbohydrates kind of into 3 main categories. We have starches, which is in the green, and then we have sugars, which is in the greens. We have starches, which is written in blue, and then we have dietary fiber written in purple. Right? And the red section on the bottom is talking about kind of more specifically the dietary intakes of carbohydrates. So let's talk about sugars first. So sugars are also what we refer to as simple carbohydrates, and this is because it has a simple chemical structure, right? And these supply our energy to the body, right? And typically our sugars or our simple carbohydrates are broken down into 2 categories called monosaccharides, which is a single chemical unit, and then what we also call disaccharide, di meaning 2, which means that there are 2 monosaccharides, right? Glucose, right, is a very common, or fructose, which is both found in fruits and vegetables, are common monosaccharides, right? Lactose, right, which is the sugar found in milk, is a common disaccharide. Right? So fruit sources that will have a lot of these sugars are fruits, vegetables, and milk, right? But there's also this caveat called added sugar, right? So sugars typically kind of fall into 2 categories of naturally occurring sugars and added sugars. So naturally occurring sugars will be found in your fruits, vegetables, and milk. But we have more added sugars, which is when we add it to foods to sweeten them. So examples of that may be honey, molasses, maple syrup, or if you're even adding just regular sugar to sweeten foods, would be considered an added sugar, right? So generally speaking, right, in the dietary world, the best thing to do is to choose natural sugars, right? So in order to get the sugars that we need, eat a piece of fruit, eat some vegetables, right? Have some milk, right? Rather than eating a cookie or some cake or a piece of pie. So thinking about how can we get those natural sugars and kind of eliminate as much added sugars as possible, right? The second category we have are starches, which we also refer to as complex carbohydrates. And they're complex because it requires more work for your body to digest, okay? And so we want the dietary fibers and the starches, right? This is kind of why we highly suggest that you eat more starches or complex carbohydrates, because your body requires more energy to break down the chemical unit into glucose so that we can then digest it, right? So typically we will find polysaccharides, which poly means many, which means that there are many monosaccharides, which means that our body needs to break down these many monosaccharides into individual monosaccharides, right? And then starches provide us that glucose for the energy, right? But it also provides us other nutrients, such as protein, vitamins, minerals, and dietary fiber, right? Which our sugars do not necessarily provide us. This is another reason as to why we suggest starches over sugars, because they do provide us all these other nutrients that we need. So thinking about some food sources for this would be bread, potatoes, and pasta, but also nuts, seeds, and dry beans would also fall under the starches. There are some also kind of some starchy vegetables such as potatoes. Potatoes is probably the most common one of the starches that we have, of the vegetable starches that we eat. Okay. Also, like corn is another one. Actually, winter squash could be another starchy vegetable that would fall more under starches opposed to sugars. Okay. And so, with that being said, in terms of the dietary world, nutritionists are going to tell you to choose complex carbohydrates. So choose the complex carbohydrates, more starches over sugars. But if you have to choose sugars, to choose those natural sugars, right? So the third category we have are dietary fibers, right? Dietary fibers are not digestible, right? We don't actually digest the dietary fibers, but it is a plant material that our body does need for digestion. Ironically, we don't digest it, but it does help aid in our digestion, right? So it's not considered necessarily a nutrient, but it is essential for some good health. And so what happens is that when we eat dietary fiber, we intake it, right? It helps us to feel full so that we don't overeat, right? And the way it does this is that the dietary fiber, when it's taken in and started to be digested, right, it absorbs water, which then creates mass, right? And this mass is what helps our food, okay, move through our large intestine, right? And this is going to promote regular bowel movements and kind of help with constipation and things like that. So the fact that it absorbs that water is what helps to move that all through our system in a happy and healthy way. And it is suggested that it may help with blood collecting and absorbing blood cholesterol. And then what happens is that it will help to absorb some of it, and then it will be removed from the body through the waste, right? So all dietary fiber is always removed through the body waste. We never actually like absorb the dietary fiber itself, right? But again, it's always a very good and helpful aspect of carbohydrates that we need to have a healthy diet, to have a healthy body. So thinking about what kind of foods you could eat in order to get your dietary fibers, generally any whole grain breads and cereals, right? Brown rice over white rice, some of our vegetables and fruits, peas, lentils, and dry beans will also have some dietary fiber. Okay, just a couple of things in terms of dietary needs. So they say about 45 to 65% of our diet should be of carbohydrates, right? So with that being said, they say about, give or take, 130 grams of carbohydrates in total for the day. And of that, 26 to 38 grams of it should be dietary fiber. And then about 24 to 36 grams, it should be less than 24 to 36 grams of added sugar, right? Now the question is, how would I even measure that to know whether or not I'm getting 24 to 36 grams of added sugar, right? So they say about 6 to 9 teaspoons of added sugar, no more than that, right? And so if you're reading the nutrition label, they say about 4 grams of sugar is equal to 1 teaspoon of sugar, right? So if you're looking at the nutrition label, you can see how much sugar you're getting. I do know that like in a kind of like a bottle of soda, like just like the 22 ounce or 20 ounce bottles of soda, you're getting anywhere between, I believe it's between like 15 and 20 grams of sugar just in that one bottle. So you're getting almost the amount of sugar you need for an entire day in that bottle of soda, right? And so that doesn't include any of the fruits and vegetables and grains and pastas and things that you're already eating, that you're getting your carbohydrates from. So thinking about, maintaining within that 6 to 8 teaspoons a day. Right? A couple other things to talk about in terms of carbohydrates are some fad diets. So fad diets are kind of popular diets that people are advertising saying that they're great because you're losing weight. One of those big ones was the Atkins diet or the no carb, low carb diet. And so, a lot of people were saying, carbohydrates are bad for you. It's what's making America fat. And in part, yes, that is true. But the biggest thing that's making America fat is these added sugars, right? And so, yes, you're going to be losing weight if you're eating less carbohydrates, right? And if you're trying to cut out carbohydrates. However, because carbohydrates gives us that main source of energy, it is actually really important for us. And so what happens is that if you're not getting enough carbohydrates, right, it's going to start our body, right, is going to start using our fat and our protein for energy, which then ends up taking away protein away from our tissues and our muscles. Right? When we do a low carbohydrate diet, we also are going to start robbing our bones of minerals. Right? It could raise our blood cholesterol, and it could increase the risk of developing kidney stones. Right? So removing carbohydrates from our diet is not necessarily the best way. Reducing carbohydrates and reducing these added sugars right here is absolutely something you should think about. So as I've said in here, choose complex carbohydrates, choose natural sugars, okay? And definitely choose dietary fibers, okay? So that's kind of the basis of carbohydrates that we're going to talk about for this lecture. Okay? If you have any questions, definitely ask me during class about any carbohydrate questions, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.